So, approaches to teaching. Somewhat kind of other methodologies, other techniques, other approaches to teaching another language. First of all, PPP. So, how do you plan out your class? Present, practice, produce, or also known, there are other ways of saying this, for example, EPA, engage, practice, and activate. So lessons, the lesson transitions from teacher-centered to student-centered. So you imagine at the beginning part, the presentation, it's all going to be the teacher talking and presenting the information, and then the tasks move in a logical fashion from controlled tasks to freer tasks. So the controlled task would be like a gap fill and say, okay, you've got the verb to be, you need to go I am, you are. That's the controlled task. The freer task would then say, okay, now you can develop a dialogue with your partner or practice it using that verb. In this case, the example was the verb to be. So hello, how are you? I'm fine, and you. So it's not completely free. That's why it's called a freer task, because you're not asking them to do absolutely anything they want, but you're giving them more leeway, a little bit more opportunity to create the language and be a bit more independent in it. So the control task is looking at language accuracy, and the freer task is looking at language fluidity. So there's a clearly defined plan for inductive teaching. So it's really, you want to teach the present simple. It's really quite easy to use PPP. You would set up the presentation of the language, and you would then move on to giving them some book work, maybe some practice worksheets, and then finally you would have an activity or a task for them to complete. In reality, there are more stages to the plan. It's not just PPP, there's more to it, and we'll look at that later. It can also be overused and thus becomes boring. If you're only going to ever use PPP, this is the limitations of course books, that they tend to follow this kind of method, and it can become slightly boring. Then we've got student-centered versus teacher-centered classrooms. So we've talked about this previously, but the focus is on or account for learners' needs, styles, and goals. It gives some control to the student. So, for example, in group work, they can decide for themselves what they want to do. Curricula that include the consultation input of students that do not presuppose objectives in advance. So that's quite innovative, really. I mean, to say that, okay, I'm actually going to step into the classroom not really knowing what I'm going to do. I'm just going to let the students figure it out, or consulting them beforehand. Perhaps when you're working for a business or a tour agency, or you've got a private one-on-one class, you are essentially going to ask them what do they need to work on, and you're going to develop the course based on their objectives. It allows them to be creative and to innovate as well, so they can figure things out for themselves. They can design their own tasks. They can think of new ways of doing things. It enhances a student's sense of competence and self-worth too. They're taking the role on for themselves. They're developing autonomy and responsibility, and that gives them a lot of confidence. Cooperative and collaborative learning. So students work in groups and pairs. They share information and give aid to each other. So the idea is less competition and more collaboration. Benefits are improved intrinsic motivation, so you're helping your friends out, and therefore that gives you some motivation. Heightened self-esteem, you're going to feel good about yourself, feel confident that you can help others. Creates caring and altruistic relationships, so you're actually going to increase the rapport and the security, the psychological security in the classroom, and lowers anxiety and prejudice. So working together first to figure things out before the student has to present the information in front of everyone is going to lower their anxiety and any sort of prejudice. So next we have think, write, pair, share. So the traditional one is think, pair, share, but I've included write here because if you just say, guys, think about it, you don't know if they're actually thinking about it or not. So the write part, at least write down your ideas. gives them a sense of, well, it gives accountability to the task. You can say, well, I can see they've actually thought about it. So it's great for almost all tasks. It's not to be underused or undervalued. I really almost use this for everything that I do. It reduces anxiety and allows for thought time and reflection. So it gives the student time to think about their ideas. It hits the 4 C's, so it's collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. You can use sentence frames, so this is a good guide for students. So you could do something like, in my opinion, the most important skill for my students is because or I think because. So you first of all, you get them to think about it and write down their answers. Then they'll pair it up with their partner and compare, and then finally share it. Share it either within a group, or if your classroom isn't that big, you would share it as the class. So really helps to give them time to think about the task, to develop their own ideas, then to practice those ideas with their partner, and then finally present those ideas to the class. I use this a lot for almost all the tasks that I get in the course books. We've got a vocabulary task. They have to pair it up. So think about it, do the activity on your own, then pair it up, share it with your partner, and then share it with the whole class. So it really should not be underused or undervalued. Think, pair, share. Remember that one. Test, teach, test. Another kind of methodology that which is often used in the production stage. In the presentation stage. I use it in the presentation stage. So you want to know where your students are at already. Maybe you're just beginning with them, so you might give them a worksheet and say, do the test, and then you get the tests back, and then you go, oh, okay, look, they obviously need to work on this point, and they need to work on that point. So you teach them that, and then you do the test again, and then hopefully they should have improved. On a smaller scale, when you're doing the presentation of the grammar point, essentially the testing is eliciting. So rather than saying, hey guys, this is what we're going to do today, this is the rule, these are the rules and everything like that, you're going to try and pull the information from the students rather than just give it to them. By pulling the information from them, you're keeping them engaged, you're keeping them interested. So rather than saying, okay guys, what color is this? Rather than saying, hey guys, this is red, you say, what color is this? You're allowing them to think for themselves, and you're creating the opportunity for them to talk, so they get to speak more, and you as the teacher know where they stand. Do they already know this or not? Do they already know these colors? So you elicit the information, then you present the information, so you teach it, and then you can test it again, and this is where it shifts from, essentially they're both asking questions, eliciting, or concept check questions. So the idea of eliciting is to ask questions rather than explain. And concept check questions is this point where you go, okay, you've taught red, now you go back to the pen or whatever object you have, and you say, okay, is this red? And you've already taught it, so you've already listed it, you've already explained what red is, and then now you're checking to see if they know what red is. And you're checking to see whether information has been understood. If they say, no, teacher, it's green, then you go, uh-oh, something's gone wrong again. So eliciting and concept check questions are very useful techniques, methods to be used, also not to be forgotten. We'll go into a little bit more in more detail, I believe, later on, with looking at lesson planning and delivering the class as well. I mean, it's so much more engaging when you ask your students questions rather than just explaining everything to them, because you don't really know whether they've understood it. And this is an important point here. Rather than saying at the final test stage, do you understand? They'll probably say, yes, teacher, even though you don't really know whether they've understood it. They could be lying. They don't want to look bad, depending on the culture where they're from. Making a mistake might be seen as a terrible thing. So will never say, no, I don't understand. It gives you much more precise feedback about what information has been understood or has not. And like I said, it keeps them engaged. And they get to talk and not you, which goes on to student talk time. So the idea is that students need to practice speaking, not the teacher. Teacher talk time should be minimized. We spoke about this earlier, the idea that if you are going to talk, it should be quality talk. It should not be waffling. It should be precise, concise. Instructions should be clear, and this should minimize you going on. Okay, guys. So what are we going to do today? Okay, first of all, we're going to look at this. Would you mind, student A? Would you mind looking at turning to page 72 and looking at exercise number 1? You are waffling and talking way too much at that point. It should be much more concise and getting them to talk as well. And like earlier we said with the eliciting and CCQ, if you're just explaining like a traditional lecturer everything, or like this, I'm talking the whole time, essentially you're not talking whatsoever. So when we're teaching languages, the idea is that they need to practice and not you. So ways to do this, that students can read everything rather than you. They can read the textbook instructions, they can read the texts, they can read the answers out, they can read everything, and that's practice. Pair group work is important because this allows everyone to be talking at the same time, exponentially more STT than if you were just pointing somebody out and just having a conversation with them. You're allowing let's say you've got 8 people in a group, rather than you just one-on-one with one of the students, now you get them to talk in pairs. That is quadrupling the opportunity for them to talk. The production stage is prioritized, so the activities, the tasks, that's when they're going to be speaking the most. So kind of get through the presentation, keep that concise, don't over-explain things, get the practice done, and then focus on that production stage, because that's when they're going to really be talking and utilizing the language learned. So you generally want to aim for about 60 to 80% per lesson of STT. That's the short way of saying student talk time, STT. Aim for them to talk, not for you to be talking. Interactive learning, so kind of similar to this idea of focusing on pair and group work, receiving authentic input for real world contexts, so real life examples, producing language for genuine meaningful communication. So we've all said this before, it's about what do they need and meeting their needs and their desires. Perform tasks that prepare students for the real world, so the skills-based, practicing oral communication through the give and take and spontaneity of real conversations. So not focusing too much on the accuracy, but on the spontaneity, the fluidity of real conversations. Or, for example, writing to and for real audiences, not contrived ones. So getting a pen pal. Some writing an article for a blog, making it more authentic. Okay, next, task-based learning. This approach puts tasks at the center of methodology. So this could be, for example, spot the difference. Let's say you've got 2 images of a scene of a street in London. They look almost identical, but there are some differences between them. So what the students have to do is figure out what those differences are. So meaning is a primary. So we're looking at ways that we're looking at rather than the form, we're looking at the meaning. Why are we doing this task? It's to solve the problem, and we're using this specific language in order to solve that problem. There is a communication problem to solve, like I said, with this idea of 2 tasks, two images, and there's something wrong with one image, it's not the same as the other one, and so they need to figure that out. There is some relationship to comparable real-world activities. So yeah, I mean, this could be make a poster about language learning. This could be make a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation. It's comparable to real life. Task completion has some priority, so I mean, there is an outcome, there is a goal there. Figure out the differences or present a great poster or a campaign. The assessment of the task is in terms of the outcome. Yeah, so what's the result? So, flipping the classroom. This is a focus on delegation and prioritization of learning. So, the presentation practice stage can be done at home, especially these days with the internet and technology, or using course books as well. If they've got the course books, if you've got the material, you can send it home to them and say, look, you guys have got to do this, the present and the practice stage. Why is that? Because maybe we've only got a 30-minute class. So if we spend 30 minutes on the present and the practice stage, well, then there won't be any time for the production stage. And remember, we said the production stage is where they get to talk the most, where it's the most meaningful kind of work, most meaningful task, and the most interesting and most engaging. So you want to focus that little time that you have with them on them speaking. So the focus on class is real practice or production rather than the presentation and the practice. It gives a chance for students to be at an equal level before class. So if they've done the work, then they should all be more or less at the same level before they come in. Otherwise, then some of them may already know the information, some of them may not, and therefore that gives a bias to those who already know the stuff. So it also allows for information to be absorbed before the class. So that takes time. It takes time for the brain, especially with languages, to kind of absorb the information. So if you think about it, for the next day, you're going to do the present and the practice the day before. That gets them time to sleep on it, and then they'll come into class ready to practice and produce the language in a more meaningful way. So I love flipping the classroom. Essentially, it's kind of these lectures are this is the information being provided to you, but the practice of the information can be done through sharing, through talk, through dialogue, rather than using the time in class or with other people to share that information. You can do this stuff on your own and then do the funner, more interesting and productive stuff in class. So, blended learning. This is essentially using technology to add to the learning process. A lot of course books these days, they come with a DVD or they come with extra material or technological material like audios and interactive learning using technology. So it can be used in conjunction with flipping the classroom, essentially getting them to do the practice at home, and then the production stage can be done in classroom. There are, however, some limitations depending on where you are teaching in the world, they may not have access to computers, or these coursebooks are usually very expensive as well, and so is the technology. So it has some limitations, but if you're using course books, then like I mentioned earlier, flipping the classroom is still possible. But it's quite common these days with the accessibility of technology, of the internet. I expect to see more and more of this happening, a mix of blended learning. So real life teaching, real life classes, along with work to be done at home. The inclusive classroom. So inclusion means involving every participant and creating a support network for growth and investment. Okay, so I had some analogies here of New York City. It's an inclusive place where anyone can go to and have great opportunities in life. A kid's toy box, for example, another one. I mean, lots of different toys from who knows whereabouts. I think Toy Story, all kind of getting along together in one place. Or the Olympics, an opportunity for different nations to come together and show off their skills, support each other, grow. Inclusiveness means involvement and redistribution of knowledge. Exploitation is its opposite. So extraction of information but no redistribution. Same thing with nations. Inclusive nations reinvest their resources, whereas exploitative nations do the opposite. They just extract everything and they don't redistribute it. So analogy of this is collaboration, support, and investment. Okay, you could also look at North and South Korea, and how do those two countries, essentially geographically similar, how are they different? Well, one's inclusive, one is invested in healthcare, and education, the other one hasn't. So first days of class, what do you do? Sometimes it's like, oh, first day of class, what am I supposed to do? First beginner class, well, you're not, they don't know a whole lot, so you're probably going to be teaching the alphabet, numbers, months, colors, classroom instructions. Then you're going to, by that point, you're going to know where you're going with them. You'll be able to plan something out. I mean, that's essentially what you're going to be doing on a first day of a very basic class. With private classes, it's a little bit different. This, you're going to focus on conversation. However, you probably, I mean, they're going to be at least a level B or higher, so they're going to have some independence in how they speak. Otherwise, you're going to do what we did in the previous slide, which is alphabet, months, days of the week, stuff like that. You can ask about their past, their present, and their future, and you should absolutely take notes. So write down their errors. You provide them with the feedback from their errors and let them self-correct it. So you imagine you've got a 60-minute class. You can spend 45 minutes getting to know about them, testing them on their past, where they come from, figuring out what they're doing right now, what they like to do on a daily basis, and maybe their plans for the future. Every time they make a mistake, you just write their mistake as they said it. Then you've got 15 minutes at the end of the class to go, okay, let's look at what you said. You said this. What's wrong with that? Why is that wrong? You give them a few seconds, 5 seconds to figure it out, maybe help them underline the error where things are going wrong. And then they go, aha, I know what it is. It's that. Brilliant, well done. Or they go, no, I'm not sure. And you go, okay, great. Here's the answer. And then I know as a teacher that we should probably work on whatever they had difficulty with in that moment. So you can now take what you've learned about them to design a more personalized course or create an action plan, essentially, to say, right, obviously we're going to have to look at comparatives and superlatives, adjectives. We might need to look at the past, but it really, it takes a lot of pressure off you for the first day when you don't really know who your student is. You've never met them before, you don't know what they're like. So you're using that first class to discover their needs, their desires, and analyze their English level. Then you can go home and, I mean, I say to them, you can't really expect too much on the first day because I'm just trying to figure it out as well. You can be upfront about that. And with that, you can then, design a course. You now know what they need, and that is tailoring it to them, and therefore they're going to be super stoked about it, and they're going to really like you from day one. Okay, level up. Well done. Share your thoughts in the comments below.